up, Sooner Nation? Welcome to the SI Sooners podcast. Parker, man, we are in uncharted territory. Oklahoma coming off a 37-30 loss at Iowa State on Saturday night. I don't know any other way to say it. The Sooners were an abject disaster across the board. Offense, defense, and special teams. Everything was terrible. Nobody was good. There were certainly some good, bright moments, some bright spots, but as a team, as a unit, it was a disaster, and certainly nobody was good enough. Parker, it's the first time in any of our lifetimes that OU has lost in Ames. The last time that happened was 1960. The Beatles weren't even around then. It's incredible. The list of coaches is incredible. I want to go through this list real quick before we get going. Bob Stoops, John Blake, yes, John Blake, Howard Schnellenberger, Gary Gibbs, Barry Switzer, Chuck Fairbanks, and Jim McKenzie. None of those guys ever lost a football game in Ames, Iowa. Lincoln Riley is in elite company. In fact, did you know this is only the second time in history that Oklahoma has lost to both Iowa State and Kansas State in the same year? First one was 1931. You want more? In almost 100 years, OU has lost a grand total of 7 times to Iowa State. Lincoln Riley's got 2 of those, matching Gomer Jones, who only coached 2 years and got fired, Parker.
John, I got nothing. You might have to do this one on your own. I'm at a loss.
It's a mystery.
This just doesn't make any sense.
It's an absolute mystery. It's one of history's mysteries.
No, it certainly is a mystery, and it's just, like I said, none of it makes sense, John. You look at this Oklahoma team, you look at the talent that they're rolling out on a week-to-week basis, and it's not like it was back in 2016, the last time the Sooners started 1-2, when they were going up against one of the great group of 5 schools of the decade in Houston, and then welcomed Ohio State to Norman. No, the Sooners are 1-2 because they lost to 2 clearly inferior opponents in Kansas State and Iowa State. Those teams between them, John, Iowa State and Kansas State combined had 4 players on their rosters that were 4 or 5-star recruits. Oklahoma should have blown the doors off against these programs. And I don't know what to chalk it up to, John. I really don't, because we see so many things going wrong. But why? Why is everything falling apart for Oklahoma this early in the season? Is it simply because this is just a wacky time in college football and there's more parity than ever before, just simply due to the fact that everybody was kind of coming into the season unprepared and is really anybody's game for the first time in a really long time? Or is it a sign of a disturbing trend in terms of the leadership, the coaching, the play calling? John, there's a lot to discuss here, and there's a lot to break down over the next half hour or so here on the SI Sooners podcast.
Yeah, you're right. I'm John Hoover. I'm in Tulsa. That's Parker Thune. He's in Norman. Last night, I was in Ames, Iowa. Whew, that was a long drive. Again, we just want to thank you guys for listening to the SI Sooners podcast and, of course, watching the SI Sooners podcast on YouTube. Parker, let's just pick up the laundry basket and dump it all in the washer. No sorting, no colors, no hot and cold. The whole thing goes in. The offense stunk. The defense stunk. The defense stunk even worse than last week in the loss to Kansas State, which I didn't think was going to be possible this year. Boy, was I wrong. And the special teams were not terrible, except for like 15 seconds when Kini Nwangu went 85 yards after OU got the strip sack and took the lead. He goes 85 yards with the kickoff and sets up the Cyclones in the red zone for the tying touchdown. So yeah, the special teams were terrible also. Just another complete meltdown in all 3 phases, Parker, just like last week.
Yes, and even more so than last week, John, which again, I figured that wasn't possible, much like you. I thought that was as bad as we were going to see the Sooners here in 2020 when they walked off the field last week in Norman against Kansas State. And then lo and behold, they go and lay another egg in Ames, and it was far, far uglier, John, just because you saw them squander so many opportunities. Theo Weiss and Obi Obialo both dropped touchdown passes. Pat Fields dropped 3 interceptions. Brock Purdy gift-wrapped Brendan Radley-Hiles an interception down the middle of the field, and he somehow didn't come up with it. I guess he decided to catch it with his face instead of his hands. But there were just so many things, John, that were sloppy. And that's what it was for the Sooners. This game was sloppy. There was no attention to detail. They just weren't the sharp football team that we're used to seeing from Oklahoma with Lincoln Riley at the helm. There's so much right now that needs to change. And it starts with the fundamentals. And it starts on defense. It starts with tackling. And it starts with pass coverage. Because those are the two areas, in my mind right now, that are the Sooners' biggest area of weakness. Now, the most baffling thing to me, John, and we'll get into this a little further, obviously, the offensive line is atrocious. And I don't know why. Because they're bringing back all 5 starters from last season. They've got Bill Bedenbaugh, who's one of the best offensive line coaches, if not the best offensive line coach in the entire nation. They have so much continuity, and yet here they are, leaps and bounds worse than they were in 2019. None of it adds up, John. None of this makes sense.
I'm with you. OU lost 2 in a row now for the first time in the regular season. Since 1999, Bob Stoops' first season. Think Notre Dame and Texas. But they've started 0-2 in Big 12 play for the first time since 1998, which was John Blake's last year. Listen, you want a little sunshine? Get this. I saw this on Twitter last night, and it intrigued me just that you could have this outlook, okay? See what you think about this, Parker. If you're going to have to endure a rebuilding year, which this is, obviously, and ultimately rebuilding years are unavoidable. Every team does, every program does, except apparently Alabama, and it looking like Clemson. But why not have a rebuilding year when there's a pandemic going on, right? Games are getting canceled, bowls are getting canceled, the conferences are all over the calendar. Got some starting in October, some starting in November, some starting in September. Nobody's taking this season very seriously. Not the Blue Bloods. I mean, 20 years from now, we're going to look back and we're going to see Lincoln Riley's team went 6-4 and turned down a bowl invitation to Shreveport. And we're all going to say, oh, yeah, that was the COVID year. I remember that. That's right. We don't really count that one. So all the other years, except for the COVID year, were really good years for Lincoln Riley. What do you think about that, Parker?
Well, I'll tell you what, if there's a bowl invitation handed out in Shreveport, you can go ahead and make that trip, John, because Shreveport is one of the worst places I've ever been in my life. But in terms of the product that we're seeing on the football field for the Sooners this year, I mean, you mentioned it's as good a year as ever to have a rebuilding year, but why treat this as a rebuilding year? That's never what it was supposed to be, and Lincoln Riley and Alex Grinch have emphasized time and time again, the standard stays the same. And in a year where none of your players are losing eligibility, you have quite literally nothing to lose. Show me some aggression. Show me that you want to win football games. Show me that you're willing to insert true freshmen into the lineup for the sake of sparking your team rather than letting Brennan Radley-Hiles and Trey Norwood and all these other upperclassmen for Oklahoma that are just playing bad football to continue to walk out there and play bad football. To me, Oklahoma needs personnel change right now, immediately. And there's a lot that needs to change, but I think it starts with the personnel. Because there are quite evidently some players on the field on both sides of the ball for Oklahoma right now, John, that aren't ready to play football. And they're not playing football at the same level that they were playing last year. And again, like I said, given the fact that nobody is losing eligibility this season, you are 1-2, you're 0-2 in Big 12 play. If something doesn't change in a hurry, you're going to see that streak of Big 12 championships come to an end. So why not empty the barrel? Try everybody out. Give everybody a shot. Hey, guess what? Marvin Mims and Seth McGowan in Week 1 against Missouri State, nobody was really expecting those guys to play a significant role in the Sooner offense, but they showed flashes of potential in the opener, earned a few more snaps here and there. All of a sudden, they're 2 of the primary contributors on the Oklahoma offense. I would love to see something like that done on Alex Grinch's defensive unit. Get some of the younger guys in there. Let's see what they can do. Because right now, the upperclassmen aren't getting it done. And I don't buy into this being a rebuilding year. And I don't think it should be. I don't think that should be the mentality for Oklahoma at all.
Yeah, but you play the freshmen because it's a rebuilding year. So I think what's going to happen, I think Lincoln's going to roll out this week against Texas some more upperclassmen because he really thinks that he can get more out of those guys. I really think he's going to roll those guys out. And then when they start 1-3 for the first time since 1964, 5. I believe I looked that up last night in the car about 3 in the morning. When they start 1-3 against after losing to Texas, I think that's when you recognize and acknowledge, okay, you guys that have been playing for the past 2-3 years, go grab a seat. Go grab some pine by me over there on the bench. We're going to play these freshmen. We're going to play these redshirt freshmen. I think that's what's probably most likely to happen. And you know who comes out kind of smelling like a rose on this, Parker, is our man Jalen Hurts. Because remember the question at Big 12 Media Days last year to Lincoln Riley was, you got a brand new offensive line. You got 4 new starters on the offensive line. Creed Humphrey's a sophomore. How are you going to be able to keep your tempo and your points and your yards per play and all that stuff? Lincoln was like, our standard is our standard. Standard remains the same. I think Jalen Hurts comes out looking back at last year like, oh my God, could this team use a Jalen Hurts this year? A guy who can really run with the football, a guy who's not afraid to stand up and be a leader. I think he took a lot of bad rap last year, and I think his efforts overall might be a little bit underrated. Dude beat Texas with basically the same and CeeDee Lamb and Kenneth Murray. But yeah, the same supporting cast around him. For the most part, the role players are all the same. I don't know if that's going to happen this year with Spencer Rattler, and that's not necessarily a reflection on Spencer Rattler, but I think Jalen Hurts was such a forceful, powerful leader that he would be stepping into this season. I don't think this team would be 1-2 if Jalen Hurts was on the team. I'm not throwing stones at Spencer Rattler. I'm just saying his leadership and his forceful kind of nature of his leadership would not have this team settling for an 0-2. It just wouldn't. I got to say this. We got to get to this week. First of all, we're both hopeful that Parker and I are going to be at the Cotton Bowl. We're going to hope it works out that way. Secondly, Parker, OU's a 2.5-point favorite against Texas. What now? I mean, I don't bet on college football, but if I did, I might unload on the Longhorns.
I think it makes sense, John. I mean, Oklahoma on paper is a more talented football team than Texas, but again, on paper, they were a far more talented team than Iowa State and Kansas State. I think the way that a lot of people are probably looking at it is there's absolutely no way this Oklahoma team could drop 3 games in a row, right? Right? But hey, they absolutely could. They really could. Right now, with as sloppy as they're playing on both sides of the ball, there's a very real chance that they walk into the Cotton Bowl, and I get that Texas is coming off a loss as well, and an ugly one at that. But there's a very real chance that Oklahoma walks into the Cotton Bowl and gets shellacked.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, and I don't disagree at all. I think I'm going to pick Texas, just like I picked Iowa State, just like Caroline told me that when she was on with you guys for Game Day U, that she picked Kansas State. So we're starting to look like we got some smart people on this staff. But having said that, think about it, Parker. Texas should be 1-2 right now. If Texas Tech wasn't so impossibly bad and hadn't imploded in the last couple of minutes of that game, Texas would be 1-2, and Oklahoma would be 1-2, and I'd go cover Tulsa this week. They almost beat Oklahoma State. They shocked UCF. Give me the Golden Hurricane, right? Anyway, no, OU Texas has lost its luster with these two. Let's just call it what it is. It's mediocre teams. I'm not worried that Oklahoma is going to go down there and get blown out or anything, because I still say Texas is not all that good. I think that's fair, but I do think Texas is going to win the game, Parker.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you, John. Texas is, right now, if you look at these teams, it's already a flip of the coin, a toss-up when these two teams walk into the Cotton Bowl every year and take each other on. We've seen that in the past. You can go back to 2014 when a 1-4 Texas team managed to topple the Sooners. But it's already so evenly matched between these two teams year in and year out with this rivalry. Now you got both teams very much reeling, coming off of losses. And look, quite honestly, John, Oklahoma could walk in on Saturday and beat Texas by 40. Texas could walk in on Saturday and beat Oklahoma by 40. That's just the kind of season that it is. There's no telling what's going to happen. And there's always the element of the unknown in college football. But do we know anything this year other than Clemson, Alabama, and Georgia are the 3 best teams by far in the entire country, as expected? Because right now, nobody else impresses me. Nobody. And there's more parity than there's ever been in college football. And I tell you what, I love it, but it's maddening to watch on a week-to-week basis. I'm just trying to sit back and enjoy the chaos as much as I can, John.
I think that's fair. So far this segment, we've talked about history. We've lodged our general complaints. But coming up, we got to pull this game apart, this Iowa State game, a little bit more. Trade Pros Heat and Air in Oklahoma City. Whether you just need service or a mini split for your home office, studio, or man cave, or if you're finally ready to upgrade to a more efficient train system for your entire home, get a free estimate from Trade Pros for all your heating and air needs. Trade Pros earned a Best of 2020 award from Home Advisor and has nothing but 5-star reviews on Google. Go to TradeProsOKC.com or call 405-675-0176 or just book your appointment on Facebook. Trade Pros, that's one word, Trade Pros Heat and Air. Follow SI Sooners on Twitter at @all_Sooners. Find Parker at Parker Thune, Thune. I'm at John E. Hoover. Parker's also on Instagram. I'm on Facebook, Johnny Hoover Media. And, of course, you know our website by now, allsooners.com. If you still haven't been there, guys, just do it. I was in Ames. Next week I'm going to be in Dallas. The week after that, yeah, that's probably looking too far ahead. I don't want to jinx it, but hey, we're going to be all over this thing. SI Sooners, allsooners.com. Don't forget, it's free. We got message boards. Sound off. And then, of course, the video version over on YouTube of the SI Sooners podcast on my YouTube channel, John Hoover Media. You probably ought to check out the comments section there, too. Yikes. People are angry. I mean, they're pissed. People are upset. So I would recommend checking that out. It's a lot of fun. You just get in there and vent. Allsooners.com or my YouTube channel, John Hoover Media. Let us know what you think. And I want to say thanks again to our friends at Trade Pros. If you want to advertise with us, send us an email, allsoonersi@gmail.com. Parker, you know this now. I've been covering Oklahoma for a long time now, and I can confidently say I haven't seen a defense that tackles this poor, except for probably the Peach Bowl and maybe the USC Orange Bowl and maybe 10 or 15 other games in the past 10 years or so. I guess what I'm saying is this what we saw Saturday night? Is this systemic? Can this team actually tackle? Are they capable of tackling? I think we can safely say they're not capable of catching an interception. That's fair. But as the tackling is fundamental. It's the number one thing. Blocking on offense, tackling on defense. You can't play football without those two things. Is this something that can be fixed in a week or two of practice, Parker?
Well, I would hope so, because it's the most fundamental aspect of playing defense, John. And listen, I said last week that I needed another week before I rendered judgment on Alex Grinch's philosophy and how it was affecting the Sooners' defensive performance. And I feel confident rendering that judgment right now. When you predicate your defense on something that is so random as the creation of turnovers, you begin to neglect the more basic aspects of playing defense. And I think that's what's happened with Alex Grinch and the Sooners defensive unit. Right now, Alex Grinch and the Sooners are so laser focused on creating turnovers, on making interceptions, on forcing fumbles, you name it, that they are completely overlooking the most fundamental aspects of their job, which are tackling and proper pass coverage. And listen, the Sooners beat themselves on Saturday night. Let's call it like it is. Every single run that Breece Hall had was sparked by poor tackling. It was poor coverage. It was a busted coverage that sprung Xavier Hutchinson for the 65-yard touchdown reception. Pat Fields, as I mentioned in the first segment, dropped 3 interceptions. 3. There were 3 passes thrown in Pat Fields' area that should have been picked off, that hit him in the hands. This can't continue to happen. And it's so shocking to me, John, that a team that prides itself on its ability, its supposed ability to create turnovers, can be so bad at actually forcing them. Especially when those turnovers are literally gift-wrapped from Brock Purdy and the Iowa State offense. The Sooners did get the strip sack, their second takeaway of the season. But there were at least 4 or 5 passes, John, that Brock Purdy threw that should have been intercepted, that there's absolutely no excuse for the fact that they weren't intercepted. And that was the difference in the game. And you don't want to say that's the only thing that caused the Sooners to lose, because obviously they played poorly in other areas as well. But if the Sooners get one of those passes, maybe two, if they just manage to get one or two of those interceptions, it's a completely different ball game, and I think it's pretty much a one-sided ball game at that point, because Iowa State had to dig themselves out of a hole to get back in this game, and Oklahoma gave them a lot of help.
Takeaways equal victory. That's what they keep telling us. Parker, I try not to overreact when I see a team lose a game or win a game. I try not to say, oh, prisoner of the moment, I think this is a national championship team, or they're not ever going to win a game again. But I think it's okay now because, we've seen them do it 2 weeks in a row. This was the defense that we saw against LSU with the addition of Delaren Turner-Yell. This was the defense. I don't get it. The defensive backs, as we mentioned, are the most experienced group on the team, and they are by far the one group on the team that performs consistently the worst. To Brock Purdy, Skylar Thompson, they are exposing the Oklahoma secondary like they're a bunch of high school kids, like they're a bunch of walk-ons, and they're not. I don't understand it. How long can you blame Mike Stoops, right? When you talk about the scars that we've referenced that Alex Grinch talked about when talking about coming back from the Baylor game last year. How long are these guys going to be able to use that as a crutch? Well, we got beat down so bad. We got whipped. We got yelled at. We got screamed at. We got cussed at. Everybody hates us, but we're going to keep playing. No, man, you got to let that go at some point. You got to grow up and stand up on your own. And we're seeing a defense that's emotionally shattered, especially defensive backs, which, by the way, Alex Grinch is the safeties coach. I mean, these guys are emotionally shattered. Hey, I believe they do hand out in August. Every August there, when they hand out the pads and the helmets and all that stuff, they also hand out the big boy pants. It's time to put on your big boy pants and stand up and play football. That's what I'm not getting. There's a massive disconnect there. These guys commit unnecessary penalties. They can't, as we've referenced, catch easy interceptions that are right there in their lap, and they freeze. They've missed relatively simple tackles that turn into, just catastrophic plays for the defense. Iowa State, before the game, we said, hey, these guys, they're dangerous on offense. They're going to be a problem for Oklahoma's defense. Yeah, well, we nailed it because they can complete a forward pass and they can run block a little bit. The Cyclones, Parker scored points on 7 of their 9 possessions. They had a kneel down at the end of the game. We don't count that, but they had a fumble, they had a punt. But they had 9 possessions, and they put up points, Parker, on 7 of those against this Oklahoma defense.
John, I very much understand it if Sooner Nation is beginning to lose their patience with Alex Grinch as a coach. And I think that they should have a little bit more patience with him as a recruiter, simply because he's only had 1 recruiting class since he got to Oklahoma. But some of the things that are happening on the defensive side of the football, John, are inexcusable, and they can only be traced to poor coaching. So we're watching that game last night, John. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to tell you that, A, Buki Radley-Hiles probably shouldn't be on the field, all things considered. B, he definitely shouldn't be matched up against Charlie Kohler. And you look at the secondary, a unit with 5 returning starters. Every single one of those starters in the secondary started last season at some point. It's not a personnel issue. And this is why it's so strange to me, so baffling to me, that the Sooners are being plagued by these issues, John, is because the 2 weakest units on the team are the offensive line and the secondary, which are the 2 units that returned all their starters from last year. What changed? I don't know. I really don't. Do you have any idea, John? Because I would love to know what went wrong somewhere along the line between 2019 and 2020.
I keep hearing, Parker, as someone in the media, I keep hearing reverberation from the fans, and we keep hearing the word soft. Soft. The team is soft. The coaches are soft. Lincoln Riley's soft. I'm not sure I ascribe to that just yet, and I'll give you an example. After the Kansas State game last year, the K-State's new kind of newish interview room, there's a brick wall and a metal door between the interview room and the players' locker room, the visiting team's locker room. Lincoln Riley did not sound soft coming through the door, coming through the walls last year in Manhattan. He was getting after those guys. And we've seen video, the in-house type video of him being exuberant and excited and angry and, emphatic and things like that. But that little demonstration after they lost that game, he came in, sat down, composed himself, cool, calm, collected, gave us the answers, told us the truth. But behind the closed doors, he was furious with those guys. Expletives. Not that that's at the end all be all, but that just shows you what a cool, calm, collected customer that he is. For him to open that curtain on his team, I don't know that I ascribe to the theory that he's soft. There may be a lot of thought that that's part of the problem. Unity marches and things like that. A lot of people are not believing that that's the best thing for a football team. Whatever. These guys they're a big family, they're brotherhood. They're going to do what they need to do for togetherness. You know how it is. But I just think that there's I'm not going to say a disconnect between Lincoln Riley and his staff and the players, but the message somewhere between, especially Alex Grinch and that defense, is being lost. And Parker, here's the scary part for this Oklahoma defense. We'll go through the schedule here in the next segment. This is, as I said, pretty much the same defense as it was last year, Peach Bowl included. So I think you can count on Oklahoma, on this bunch, not playing good defense for the rest of the year. I think that's a fair assessment. But now, sorry, the record-setting offense the last 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, those guys left. They're not here to carry you anymore. That offensive line, like you said, has just been a freaking puzzle. The receivers are exactly what I said they were way back in June, Parker. They're young, they're inexperienced, they're transfers, they're unknowns, they're injured, they're suspended. This receiver core has been miserably bad. I think that's a reflection of the status of what these guys came into the season as. Rambo's not the answer, not right now. He might be long-term, but not right now. Weiss, I was wrong about him. He's not the answer. He's not the X factor. Marvin Mims has a tremendous upside, but he's just a freshman, and he disappeared in that game on Saturday. Theo Howard, Obi Obialo, those guys are not that guy, okay? The running backs, same thing. Quit with the crap sandwiches. You don't lose Trey Sermon, Kennedy Brooks, and Ramondre Stevenson, and then have Jace McClellan flip to Alabama on signing day and not have a significant drop-off. I like Seth McGowan. I think he's going to have a bright future at Oklahoma, but he's obviously, watching him the other night, he's got a long way to go. TJ Pledger, he's got a big heart. I respect him, but I don't think he's going to scare anybody on defense. Obviously, Marcus Major isn't the answer. Parker, the best weapons on this offense right now are a tight end, your man Austin Stogner, and an H-back, Jeremiah Hall. Think about that. And then the obvious, Spencer Rattler. Listen, I think he's a hell of a quarterback, and I predict he will find his way to New York at some point in the future. Not in 2020, obviously, but some point. I think he's that good. I do. But yeah, he plays like a freshman sometimes. Why? Because he's a freshman. And when your quarterback goes through stretches where he plays like a freshman, Parker, that's not going to win you a lot of games at Oklahoma.
No, it will not. And Spencer Rattler really made a poor decision in crunch time against Iowa State with that throw down the field to Charleston Rambo. And I get that Riley and Rattler and most of the Oklahoma sideline were upset that they thought Rambo had been held on the play. But hold or no hold, that was too risky a throw to make downfield into double coverage. And it's the second week in a row, John, that we've seen Rattler become erratic down the stretch. And that's a mark of a lack of composure. That's a lack of poise. That is inexperience. That is youth. And Spencer Rattler will grow out of it. I do believe that. However, right now, when you put him in those late game situations, Lincoln Riley has got to make absolutely certain that his quarterback of the future, the guy that he believes in, the guy that he recruited, he's got to make sure that it's strongly communicated to him that he cannot take those kinds of risks if he wants to win football games. Because the Sooners were in position to tie that game up, John. And Rattler made a bad throw. And that's what it came down to. And Iowa State capitalized. because that's the kind of team that the Cyclones are. That's a well-coached team. And if you make mistakes, they will make you pay for them. And Spencer Rattler found that out the hard way.
You'd like to think at some point in his career, Parker, that he's going to play a conference game and not be behind with 3 minutes to go. Not need a touchdown drive, a length of the field touchdown drive with 3 minutes to go. Maybe some of his teammates can help him out by not letting the ball go through their hands, whether it's on offense or defense. Theo Weiss dropped a big pass. Guys drop passes in the end zone. Catch the football. And then on defense, maybe you get an interception. Maybe he goes down and scores, Parker. I will say this. Rattler's scrambles, I thought, were a welcome sight. It turns out he can run. He told us he can run. He was right. I like seeing that kind of grit and determination out of your five-star quarterback. The offensive line, again, is a mystery. I don't know what else to say about these guys. I'm not going to continue to sit here and beat up Eric Swenson anymore. I'm just not. He doesn't deserve that. If Anton Harrison is better than him, then the coaches should play Anton Harrison. If he's not, then the coaches are playing the guy that they think is going to give them the best chance. And if that's Swenson, then it's Swenson. People quit beating up on Eric Swenson. He's on the field. He's playing his butt off. If he's not good enough, he would be over there on the sideline. But guess what? He's not. I just don't get fans sometimes the way they jump on players. But again, he ain't the only problem up there. Against Iowa State, those guys got taken to the woodshed as a group. 8 tackles for loss, 2 quarterback sacks, 2 hurries, only gave up 3.5 yards per carry rushing. That's OU's average for the season, by the way. They only netted 114 yards, Parker. And play calling on the first drive, this is not all on the players. Play calling on that first drive was weird to me. After the big play over the middle to Rambo, 3 straight runs up the middle, and then you go for a field goal on 4th and inches? Man, that's Kevin Wilson at Texas A&M bad right there. You guys remember that one, I'm sure. Up next on the SI Sooners podcast, we're going to talk about Ronnie Perkins.
Hey there, loyal listeners. Parker Thune here with SI Sooners. Are you a business owner looking to get your product out there to the masses? Let's say you run a hotel in Norman, or a car dealership in Oklahoma City, or a restaurant in Edmond. Or maybe you're just a small online business who creates and sells OU merchandise, and you want Sooner Nation to come sample your wares. Consider advertising in this space right here on the SI Sooners podcast. SI Sooners reaches thousands of readers, viewers, and listeners literally every day, and the SI Sooners podcast is the ideal place to find your next customer. To advertise, send an email to allsoonersi@gmail.com or send us a direct message on Twitter at @all_Sooners.
Final segment of the SI Sooners podcast, Parker. Not that I think the return of Ronnie Perkins would make much of a difference on this team. In fact, I'm going to ask a hard question here in a second, but reports on Saturday from Sooner Scoop and The Athletic were of the belief that his NCAA suspension has been lifted. We've heard nothing official yet. It's been reported that he's going to be in the lineup at the Cotton Bowl against Texas. Again, we've heard nothing official yet. Did see a report from Dean Blevins today kind of countering that hasn't been made official yet. But how about all that? Is Ronnie Perkins going to help?
Well, I would hope so, John, because that pass rush is struggling. And they did manage a strip sack against Brock Purdy on Saturday, obviously. But there's nobody on that defensive line right now that has near the kind of raw talent that Ronnie Perkins does. And so getting Perkins back is going to be huge for that front seven, especially a front seven that's struggled so far to contain the run game. And we saw that on Saturday night when Breece Hall went for 28 carries, 139 yards, and 2 touchdowns. That can't continue to happen if the Sooners are going to win football games. So the sooner they can get Perkins back and up to speed, the better.
Yeah, so my question is this. If you're Ronnie Perkins, would you want to come back to this team? I mean, you kind of have to. You're all in now. You've appealed and appealed and appealed. Your school helped you, stood behind you, went to bat for you. Your coach said all the things he said. Everyone's come through, and you're ready to go. But, dang, if I'm Ronnie Perkins, I'm not 100% sure that I'm 100% invested in coming back for what probably is going to be a 6-4 team that has no discipline, doesn't do the fundamentals, can't run, can't run block, can't tackle, can't catch interceptions. Why would he come back, Parker?
Well, because he can make a difference, I think, is the clear answer to that question, John. The fact that Ronnie Perkins is more than likely the most physically gifted defender that the Sooners have. And so getting a guy back, a guy of that caliber, is going to be huge one way or another for the defense. And does it mean that they're going to take a massive leap and improve from 1 week to the next? Not necessarily. But what it does mean is that they're going to be a lot more confident in those guys down in the trenches because they know that they've got a guy out there on the edge that can get after the quarterback. And Jalen Redmond and Ronnie Perkins are those two guys for the Sooners. And obviously Redmond's out the door, opted out. But getting Perkins back, I think, is going to be a stroke of confidence for this Oklahoma defense. And that's what they need right now because they don't look confident. In fact, they look timid. They look beat down mentally. And so I think Ronnie Perkins, just in terms of the energy that he can inject into this Sooner defense, is going to be big when he returns.
He looks hungry, and he plays hungry. He was out there before kickoff, after the warm-ups and stretches. He was out there giving his guys the business. He called them all up in a big circle, his defensive linemen, and was just giving them the business, saying, here's how we're going to play tonight. So he's trying. Ronnie Perkins is trying to do his part. He was on site. Couldn't play, but he was on site injecting, like you said, some energy. We'll see. Parker, let's dive into the rest of the Oklahoma schedule because this is going to be fun. Like I said in the first segment, we didn't see OU losing to Iowa State and Kansas State. I mean, we all agreed that this would be a tough part of the schedule, and that does continue this week with Texas for sure, but it's been only once in school history that they've lost to both the Cyclones and the Wildcats in the same year. So 1 and 2, no, I'll admit, I didn't see it coming. But since we're talking about that, let's do the rest of the schedule. Parker, Texas. I say Oklahoma loses this week, at least when we're recording this on Sunday night. What say you?
I think they win, John. I do, simply because Texas can't play any defense. And you can obviously counter and say, well, neither can Oklahoma. But the reality is that Oklahoma has more weapons on the offensive side of the football than Texas does. And I think that's the difference. So I'll give Oklahoma the win in the Red River Showdown.
Then an open date. Then we go back to the Metroplex for TCU. Just beat the Longhorns in Austin, Parker. No big deal, right? For the 6th time in 7 years, TCU beats Texas. I say this game for Oklahoma is a 50-50 proposition. I like to waffle on certain things. This is one of them. And I do enjoy a good waffle, by the way. Lots of maple syrup. I think Oklahoma could easily win. I do think that they could easily lose. So why don't we revisit the coin tosses at the end of this bit? Parker, TCU.
John, I've said it for months. I think if Oklahoma was going to lose a game in the regular season in 2020, it would be this one. Because I believe that TCU is a massively improved football team, and they welcome Oklahoma to their own building this year. And so right now, John, as things sit today, at the beginning of October, I would say Oklahoma loses this game. I would be confident making that assertion.
Halloween at Texas Tech. I think OU wins this game, but I got to say, I'm only about 60% confident in that pick right now. Parker, what say you?
Well, I'll tell you what. If the Sooners have anybody that can match up with TJ Vasher, they better figure out who that is between now and Halloween. Because if they don't, it's going to be a long night for that Sooners secondary. I truly believe TJ Vasher is the best wide receiver in the Big 12 right now. And like I said, it could be quite a performance from Vasher on Halloween if the Sooners are as shoddy defensively, or rather in the defensive secondary, as they have been over the first few weeks of the season. I will give Oklahoma the win just because Texas Tech doesn't have much else, but it would not shock me if Vasher turned in a massive performance.
Kansas, November 7th. That's a win. Moving on. I'm assuming you're on board with me there. You're not worried about the hat?
100%, John. Right. If Oklahoma loses to Kansas, John, we can officially call it a wrap on this season.
The season is over. Then after another open date, the big one, Oklahoma State in Norman. I'm calling the Cowboys as of right now. I got to say, I don't love OSU. I think, like I said, Tulsa should have beaten them. The Cowboys, I watched every minute of that game. They lucked into that win. Tulsa should have won, but they've got things going in the right direction. I know they just crushed Kansas. No big deal. Don't overreact. But right now, hey, they're the best the Big 12 has to offer.
Well, John, I'll tell you what, and you know this, I've been on the Shane Illingworth train since long before he came to Stillwater, and I think that if Oklahoma State continues to roll with him as their starting quarterback, that they'll beat the Sooners in November. However, if they turn things back over to Spencer Sanders, I think Oklahoma gets the win. I think Sanders is far more erratic, doesn't have quite that same ability to get the ball downfield to a guy like Tylan Wallace, which is going to be how you beat a team like Oklahoma. And so here's what it comes down to for me, John. Again, much like you said, coin toss, 50-50. If it's Illingworth that's playing quarterback for the Pokes at that point, I like Oklahoma State. If it's Sanders, I like the Sooners.
Dang. That's definitive. November 28th, OU at West Virginia. I don't think West Virginia is any good at all. I thought that about them in the offseason, and they're proving me right like every week, I think. I think OU wins that game, Parker, in Morgantown, again, undefeated in Morgantown.
Well, yeah, John, Oklahoma hasn't lost to West Virginia since they joined the Big 12, and I don't imagine that changing this year. Oklahoma is just by far a more talented team than the Mountaineers, and I don't even know if the Mountaineers have those pieces to pull off a massive upset the way that Kansas State and Iowa State did. So I will take Oklahoma in resounding fashion in Morgantown.
Watch out for that West Virginia pass rush. That's the one weapon I think that's the one position that they can weaponize against a team like Oklahoma. Baylor on Norman, December 5th. Man, to me, this is kind of another coin toss. Oklahoma's probably going to be a better football team than they are now. They're going to be a better team then than they are now. We'll see. If they're not, they got problems. And I know they don't play that game till December, but again, man, if this game was played today, Parker, I'd probably pick Baylor, but, today, 2 months down the line, I think I'll assume that Lincoln Riley and Alex Grinch have earned their millions of dollars, and they've gotten this thing fixed by then, and I think Oklahoma beats Baylor.
Well, yeah, if West Virginia is as bad as you're making them out to be, John, then how much worse is Baylor after the Mountaineers beat them in overtime on Saturday? I would take Oklahoma over the Bears, at least as it sits today. And again, that could change. I think Baylor's in a really good position long-term, having Dave Aranda at the helm and having some of the guys that they have in that lineup on both the offensive and the defensive side. So long-term, I really like Baylor to start to challenge Oklahoma at the top of the Big 12. Well, shoot, is Oklahoma at the top of the Big 12 anymore? I don't even know at this point. But no, for this season, I will take the Sooners over Baylor.
Okay, so I've got, on top of the 1 and 2 start, I've got losses to Texas, Oklahoma State, and maybe TCU. So I think Oklahoma's looking at a 6-4 season, maybe even 5-5. And then if things aren't fixed by Baylor, you're staring at the possibility, seriously, of 4-6, according to my schedule, my picks here in the first week of October. Parker, what's your final tally for Oklahoma's season?
Yeah, like I said, I think I'm not willing to say definitively that they will lose to Oklahoma State because I think it depends on whether you got Illingworth or Sanders, as I mentioned. But I don't love the Sooners' chances going to TCU. I don't. I think the Horned Frogs, with Gary Patterson at the helm, are a very well-coached team and the kind of team that can take advantage of the mistakes that the Sooners will inevitably make, John. And so I think the Sooners are looking at a 7-3 campaign. At worst, 6-4. I would be very surprised if they won anything less than 6 games.
And then me and you are going to Shreveport. We're going to hear from Lincoln Riley a couple times this week, we hope. Probably Alex Grinch on Wednesday as well. Hopefully they'll give us some answers. We'll have it all for you on allsooners.com. Hey, don't forget to check out our next podcast on Wednesday. I'm pretty sure the mailbag is already full, but maybe we'll open up another one. Would encourage you to send us your questions, your comments, your concerns, whatever you got. Hit me up on Twitter at John E. Hoover or hit Parker up at Parker Thune. Listen to the SI Sooners podcast wherever you get your podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, Google. Oh, and again, I love this. I love saying this. We're on Amazon. Just say, Alexa, play the SI Sooners podcast. It's over on the website, allsooners.com. You can click on the player and listen either on your phone, your tablet, or your computer. And the video version is over on my YouTube channel, John Hoover Media. For Parker Thune, I'm John Hoover. See you guys.